Fast Yearly Podcast presents The Tome Travelers.
Welcome to this season of Tome Traveler. This episode, I'm joined by a raiding party I'll happily pillage any village with, so let's have everyone introduce themselves, what you've been involved in, and what cantrip you wish you could cast in real life. And so I'm going to start us off in the order of what I have, and I'm going to toss it directly to Shawn.
Ooh, first up. Hi, my name is Shawn. You probably recognize me as a regular on several different shows here at Rook and Rasp, even before Rook and Rasp. Mini painter, things like that. Cantrips that I wish I could have. I think I'm going to go really time saver and wish I had prestidigitation and I could just clean things up in like instantly.
You got
Damn
the
it,
good
Shawn,
one right there.
You stole mine.
Well, see, the reason I was thinking about that is I've got a dog that's absolutely terrified to take a bath and I could just prestidigitation him.
That
I
works. Absolutely. Well, since you piped in, Michael, and that was the one you were thinking about too, I'm actually going to toss it to Kori. So, Kori, what about for you?
I am Kori. You have seen me here on Rook and Rasp before. You can also find me Monday nights at Midnight Alley on YouTube. Honestly, my go-to cantrip that I wish I had in real life is just plain and simple message. Like just being able to ping somebody across the room like, hey, get me out of here is so useful.
I've been trying to come up with one. I'm still because prestidigitation got taken. But we are now going to go with Sharene.
Hello, I'm Sharene. I'm occasionally on the internet, but mostly not. And I've done some writing for Nerdburger Games, and I will be running games there at Gen Con this year. I mean, the thing about prestidigitation is that it does so many things. It's not just cleaning, but I think other than that, mending.
Yeah.
Because I sew, and so that would make a lot of things very handy. And also, I can be a little bit clumsy sometimes. So, just being able to put things back together. No, I broke it. No, I didn't. I think that's pretty useful.
That's a good one. No, definitely. That's a really good one. And Michael, I'll actually let you go before me. Let's see if you can knock me out of the running on the one I want to do.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, Michael, you can find me here on Rook and Rasp in a number of different shows and productions I do through the Seriously Let's Plays. Currently doing the Star Wars show Smuggler's Blues on alternate Tuesday evenings. Please come by and check out our ragtag crew and that show. You can also catch me on the show Tubular Teens with Titans. It's a podcast. It is Power Rangers inspired, and we are in late to middle of season 2. It's a lot of fun. I play the team mentor. You get to chew a lot of scenery. It's great. And then you can also... I'm all over the place. I mean, really, I am. You can find me at Gen Con this year working at the Kobold Press community room. I'll be in there helping seat people and helping people get to their games and making sure that everybody has what they need at the table. Kind of like a little valet, if you will. That'll be fun.
Nice.
It's a good time.
I'm really happy to hear that you're going to be back there.
Oh, yeah. This will be the third year that they've had me come out and help. Love to do it. It's a lot of fun. It's a good group of people to get to play with and meet. And looking forward to spending 5 or 6 days in Indianapolis with like 70,000 people. It'll be fun. 80,000 probably this year. Who knows?
I'll have to swing by and say hi.
Yes, please do. I know that I believe our illustrious leader is looking to make another pizza party happen this
heck
year.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, we will all have to get together and consume mass quantities of sauce and dough.
Definitely.
So cantrip for me. Here's the cantrip, John. I hope this doesn't muck up your works. I'm gonna go with guidance.
Ooh.
Especially in the last 6 to 8 months, I feel like there's a number of times I would have really liked to be able to ask the ether to provide me with an answer. Over on Rook and Rasp, we do Metaphysical Mudroom, and there are tarot card readings, typically weekly, done by different members of the group. And those have become invaluable to me in the last 6 to 8 months of my life. And I guess it's kind of like having my own little guidance once a week on Sundays. But yeah, I think guidance would be the one, since the other ones have been taken, Shawn. It'll be guidance for me.
Nice. If you don't know me already, my name is John. I'm part of the leadership here at Rook and Rasp, and I wrote my own RPG called Gutterpunk, and I've now written for Third Eye Games PIP system, as well as for Wedding Games on their Never Going Home most recent Kickstarter. But for me, if I were to pick a cantrip, I actually think it would be open close, because I have locked my keys in the car many a time. I oftentimes just need to get in the house, and our house has a padlock, and I forget the code. But wouldn't it be great just to screw with people and randomly open the doors and freak them out?
It would work on me.
I was just thinking about stubborn jars.
I can think of some other really fun uses for that. We can talk about those off stream.
See, for me, I use a mobility scooter, and not everywhere has the buttons, right?
Ooh,
so I can just walk up and be like,
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
that'd be great.
Very practical.
That'd be a new one. I'm not familiar with that cantrip.
Yeah, I think it was.
Pathfinder.
Well, either way, I'm using it.
Yeah, it still counts. It's still a d20 system.
It is. Hey, nice segue. Today we're visiting an often maligned dice that games use. It is the d20. Now, it is, I would say, kind of a elephant in the room. It's also something that right now in the tabletop community, there seems to be this huge divide of people who hate D&D and people who love D&D and people who are like, who here has heard of beggar talk or beggar?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
So the overall idea, this concept, which I think came about 2 years ago, was a group of creators who basically started up saying, we're begging you to play anything but D&D. You go on TikTok and put in beggar talk, and you're going to find people specifically talking about anything but D&D. But this is where things get interesting. I want to say most of us don't hate D&D as a game. But we'd love to see people expand their repertoire of tabletop RPG games. When I first started playing games, D&D shared shelf space with ninjas and super spies, Battletech, and more. And it wasn't such a lopsided space. So I'd love to get other people's perspectives on that.
I think in some cases the lack of brick and mortar does change that. Because I remember our local gaming shops would occasionally put a display. Maybe they got in a new indie game and they put out a display, or they would group a lot of similar games together. So all the sort of sci-fi stuff was on this set of shelves, or the fantasy stuff was on this set of shelves. And sure, it was mostly full of D&D, but there was other stuff, and it was right there in your face. And there was never a time that I recall that everyone was like, no, you have to be playing only this game, or you can't play this game, or, it was just sort of like, this is the most popular one right now. But if somebody said, hey, could we play this weekend? Sure. So I find this attitude kind of odd. It's not something I've personally experienced.
You can look behind me and see my thoughts on games. I love it. I want people to enjoy and embrace more of them.
John, we all know that that's just a background. It's very well animated, but it's just a background.
Yeah.
I was on with Matthew Orr, his interview show. I don't think he'd ever seen the studio space since we decided to make the library the background.
It is terrifying, the content, because I remember the old house where it had a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit upstairs, just kind of spread out everywhere. And now it's just like scary large.
Ours is scattered, and I'm scared. Like, if we actually can all get it in one space. I have like most of the Changeling books, which is a lot.
What?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's amazing, actually.
But, back to a lot of it is kind of like, D&D is almost like capitalism in the gaming universe right now. It's like, it is the powerhouse. It's got the most money. It's going to entice you to come play it because it wants to keep making the money. And so, the game designers are like, we're begging you not to play is just their way of giving a finger to capitalism, trying to cut that pie down smaller.
And unfortunately, for the beggars here, it's kind of a threefold problem, honestly, getting people to play anything other than D&D. Pathfinder is the biggest competitor to D&D as a direct one-to-one.
Yep.
But Pathfinder also doesn't have the sheer amount of media representation, not just in terms of podcasts like the ones I participate in, but also bigger Let's Plays like Critical Role being the biggest one, but also the McElroy brothers having done several shows in the 5th edition setting or system. The D&D movie that actually is one of the best game adaptation movies I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's almost as good as Clue is in terms of game adaptation and the feel of the game.
I don't know. I thought Battleship was a really good adaptation.
What?
I haven't seen that one yet.
To build,
I just
Sorry,
wanted
go
to
ahead,
show you
Sharene.
before I have to put them back.
Yeah, so many books.
So
Yes.
pretty.
Oh, the art.
I love
the
Yeah.
art.
Changeling system.
Oh, it's so good. Thank you.
Hand those off to your lovely assistant. That's nice. I was going to build on what Kori said, and again, I don't know that it's necessarily the capitalism part, but it is just a simple fact of representation, right? Like how much
Saturation.
of the media that we consume over the
Yeah.
last even 15 to 20 years references in some way, and whether it's either an episode of a comedy that we enjoy or a drama or what have you, references D&D specifically as a brand, as a thing. Think of the show Stranger Things, obviously, is a big one that would pop out right now.
Yeah.
The entire premise of that show is built on Dungeons and Dragons. It's not built on any other role-playing game system. They don't talk about any other role-playing game system. All the enemies are from Dungeons and Dragons. Like, it's literally just built on that.
I
And
think
that comes
kind of-
from a generation that grew up with it, though. Like, those creators all grew up with D&D as being the game they were
Yeah.
playing.
It's kind of like
Sure.
Phoenix.
But I think in another way that ties in, because the market is primarily online, we've lost many of these sort of third spaces, community spaces, where we don't really have forums very much anymore. If you go on Reddit, they're all very dedicated to specifics, and it's really hard to get into sort of generals. It's really hard to find a place like the old gaming store where you would go to the fantasy section, and there was D&D and then some other games, and so we also have to really look at marketing being heavily a very big issue. Cory Doctorow and his talks about really educational talks about how algorithms work and how it is all pay to play. The more you pay, the more that ad gets seen. And so everywhere you go, it's D&D, D&D, D&D shoved in your face. And it's always done by that company on that company's site or on a third-party site that they've heavily paid to override any other person who might have cobbled together enough money for a Facebook ad or whatever.
And there's definitely a smart point in all that, and smart and frustrating. Smart and frustrating. That is, during 3rd edition, literally, they put out a brand. And it was a brand that I blame, personally, for the way that it's gone. D20 compatible. The famous D20, SRD, and OGL. And all of a sudden, everything was associated with Dungeons and Dragons. And how many games remade themselves in D&D? And so it's smart marketing, but it drives me nuts because it's like, we use the D20. We are D20. You are the D20 engine. It's like, we are the Actual Play company. What's the name of your company? Actual Play. Everybody goes and searches for it. It's what comes up. Or we are Dice Company. You search for Dice Company online, and all of a sudden, they come up. And so there's that intelligence to that marketing, but it still drives me nuts.
Yeah, and it is very limiting.
It's also kind of a self-feeding cycle too, because the more organic reach something has, beyond what they're paying for, you've also got so many of these people pushing D&D as their system that they're using because they're feeding into, hey, this is a popular thing. Here's our actual play of it. We are not sponsored or affiliated with D&D in any way, shape, or form, but we're using it because this is what's popular and this is what's going to attract the most attention.
But I also think we're hitting the the self-eating cycle that is D&D. I think we're hitting a overload, and it's going to start, the groups like us are going to start navigating to other systems, and that will percolate up. I'm not going to change anybody's mind on what's cool, but if someone's asking me to run a game, I'm like, yeah, I'll run this, and this. I don't want to run D&D. I've played it to death. I'm not really happy with where it's at, but if you guys are cool trying something else, I'll be happy to run it for you. And especially with, all the angst right now with the new, Dungeons and Dragons 5.5 and, it's decisive.
Hasbro and WotC have also made a number of missteps in the last 6 months to a year, a year and a half, I should say. Nice
content, we'll take it.
Yeah, well, and the licensing issues again with the OGL stuff that happened early in 23. Yep. There have been a number of missteps that have pushed people to look into other things, right? And push other game designers and other game publishers to try and take their own tack on, let's make our own license that we can allow people to use. I mean, if I was a content creator with a license that had a monetary value, a real monetary value, I would be silly not to consider using a D20 license to create this game for this product, to get it on shelves as quickly as possible and get it into people's hands.
And to get your game out there.
Whether that is the perfect system for my game or not, or for my license, that's a creative decision that people have to make at their own level. But I mean, you can't deny the sheer amount and the ease in which you could get your license into people's hands by using a system that's so commonly referenced and known.
Yep, but we all play it. I play D&D, but the D20 is more than D&D. And in fact, I wanted to do this show because I think that the D20, the dice itself, may be the gateway to get people into other games initially. There are so many wonderful games out there, but how many do you know of, or in general, the population out there, how many do you know of that aren't D&D? One of the things I love about Tome Travelers is that we research and we kind of take you back in time. We do a little time travel,
We were supposed to look stuff up, right? There was homework.
Well, if you didn't, I have enough knowledge. I might be able to cover it.
Your dogs ate my homework, John.
That I can see happening.
Or that 10 minutes before the show started, me frantically flipping through an old Palladium book, going, I cannot remember any of this.
There's also, a second screen, right up to my side.
So let's talk about it. Let's go into the history. Where did the D20 come from? I will toss out there, we actually have, although not a numeric dice, the polyhedron that is the D20. We have found sources of it and creations of it that date all the way back to ancient Egypt. The shape itself has been around for more than just centuries. But when it entered into being used in gaming, it entered into modern use in 1970, and it was first printed and created in Japan for gaming. That's the first numeric dice used in this method, and then by the Bristol War Game Society in the UK. It has since then been adapted into tabletop RPG games and did not originate with D&D. It came out of wargaming. I have a few fun and important historical things that happened in the year 1970 that I want to get everybody's reactions to. How about the Apollo 13 famous mission was in 1970?
Yeah.
Yep. The Concorde jet made its first flight.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that being a big deal when I was a kid.
I had always dreamt that I would get to ride on a Concorde when I was younger. I'm kind of sad it doesn't exist anymore. Well, it does. There's some company bringing it back for novelty flights.
Honestly, I don't even remember why they stopped. I mean, they were
Cost.
Yeah.
There was also some environmental damage and a lot of
their engines were very
people. Because when they broke the sound barrier, it's awfully loud.
I remember the Concorde being ubiquitous enough to just be like a throwaway line reference in the remake of Parent Trap. Concorde gets you here in half the time when they reunite in England. after most of the movie.
I don't even remember that part. Oh my goodness.
But yeah, I remember it always being like the quick travel trope in like TV and stuff. They could just take the Concorde, like it wasn't hideously expensive at the time.
Yeah.
Like there was just a reference I was watching. I had it on the background noise, The Nanny, where they hopped on the Concorde to get to England real quick. I'm like, yeah, that's what rich people do.
Well, speaking about environmental, how about President Nixon signed into law the Public Cigarette Smoking Act and OSHA in 1970?
The OSHA thing is cool, but I am young enough that I might need a refresher course on the Cigarette Act.
So there's been a lot of different cigarette acts that have come in from about 1970 to 1980, but this one specifically talked about creating spaces where there wasn't supposed to be smoking.
Okay.
I was gonna say I thought Nixon's Cigarette Act was responsible for limiting or stopping smoking on flights, but that's not true because the first time I flew was in like '83, and they had a smoking section, but I don't, you're in an encased tube.
Yeah.
That just gets everywhere.
The curtains don't really help.
No.
No. Okay, so
We have over 100,000 people protested the Vietnam War in Washington, D.C. Now, this was one of the largest protests that happened that was a war protest. There were earlier ones. I'm going to bring up a topic that we talked about a little bit. We were talking about generations and everything else. And we give a lot of crap to the older generation, and rightly so. But they protested for 7 years straight against wars. We can't even protest racism for 2 years in a row. I had to get that out.
I get it.
oh yeah, no.
No, I was raised by hippies, and like my mom was a union rep, and she helped get same-sex couples some rights at her job, and get them like marriage.
Thank you.
Before it was legal, like same-sex marriage was legal here. She helped them get like benefits and that sort of thing. So not all boomers are the worst.
Yeah. But how about this one? Now, this isn't one of my secret ones I held back. If you're ready. Now, in 1970, the Methodist Church was one of the first Christian churches to allow women to become full ministers. Now, this was 2 years before women were given equal rights in college education by the United States government. So I would like to toss that one out there because, yeah.
Wow,
the Methodist Church was a progressive?
Yeah.
Which is hilariously relevant given what's going on in the Methodist Church right now.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
That's interesting because I grew up going to United Church, and I don't know if they were the first, but I know that they have had women as ministers for a long time, and then they would perform same-sex unions as well for a very long time.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize they weren't the first to have women. But yeah, it's pretty sad. My mom said even just a couple years before I was born in 1977, my parents both had good union jobs, but my mom made a bit more money than my dad because she had a college degree. And she went to get like a washing machine or something. And to get a credit card, she needed my dad's signature.
Yeah.
She had a college diploma and a union job that they trusted her with that, but apparently her silly woman brain just couldn't handle a credit card all to herself without her husband looking over her shoulder.
But you know how women are with shopping. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I grew up making that noise at my television so often. With the Jetsons and the Flintstones. Like you'd be like, oh ha ha, the lamp is a pterodactyl or whatever, and then he'd be like blah 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 women, and you'd just be like, oh. And yeah.
Moving on within this, so in 1970, tons happened in the music scene. This was the year that Jimi Hendrix died. This was the year that Janis Joplin died. This was the year that Joni Mitchell retired. This was the year of Simon and Garfunkel's last album released together. Outside of all this, because the music is dying. The Beatles broke up, the Supremes broke up, and the Monkees broke up this year.
That one hurt.
Love the Monkees.
Well, do you say the music is dying, or do you say that 1970 was the year of the solo project?
Probably the year of the solo project, but when you think of all these groups and just the impact, just going from Beatles to Jimi Hendrix, the overall impact that both had and still have. All right, and I've got one last one for you to end on a bright note. And that is, this is the year that Walt Disney's Aristocats is released in theaters.
I love that one. It was so cute.
I love the Aristocat.
You know, it's a good film.
Second or third favorite Disney animated film of that era.
Oh,
the
yeah.
whole era.
And the little piano playing scene. It's so cute.
So cute. Has its problems, but oh my god, that story. Can we just give props to Thomas O'Malley for actually being a good example of non-toxic masculinity? Like, legit, I know this is it's so rare, but also, like, I know this is a bit of a derailment, but
Derail away.
Yeah.
I just have to throw it out there that he found a very attractive woman, both being cats, doesn't matter, and only blinked for a second when he realized that she was a single mother with 3 kids in tow. And he got over it really fast and said, hey, I'm going to get you and your kids home. No big deal. And proceeded to do just that and protected the kids along the way. Like, be Thomas O'Malley, people. Just be Thomas O'Malley.
It was Prince Charming in Sleeping Beauty. I mean, the thing that got me about Sleeping Beauty was that the evil queen in that one was the only one of any Disney movie that I've ever been aware of, except for in Hunchback of Notre Dame, that they mention specifically, religion. She serves Satan specifically, mentions by name. And so Prince Charming barely knows Aurora, but he thinks she's really cool, and he kind of sees the situation she's in, and he's like, this is not right. This is, I mean, it's cool that you've got fairies for parents, but you're not really supposed to be in this situation. You're very isolated. You kind of need to talk to other human beings, maybe? And and then she gets taken away, and then he goes and fights a minion of literal Satan for her. And I'm like, and even not just for her, though, like, just because it needs doing. He saves her in the process, but it needs doing. He's got to do this. It's his job. I liked that.
Man.
It didn't strike me as a gendered issue. To me, it portrayed him in a very knightly way without ever making him a knight,
Good point, yeah.
I don't hear anybody here singing the praises of Gaston, so I think we're good.
But there's a whole song about what guy he is.
No one can play like Gaston.
But I think a lot of those concepts are really solidified and amplified in a lot of these old games, where you had these very specific tropes, and they were expected to look and be a very specific way, and they were so stereotypical. I think until I really started listening to conversations about diversity and the need for representation, and obviously, as a girl, I noticed in all the shows growing up how there was either not a girl or one girl whose function was girl and be girl. And that was it. And, they were always just shallow and stupid. And, I you couldn't identify with them. And you were like, that's not even a person. That's a collection of, hate. And then when you get to the D&D table, it was very much a lot of that. As a girl, there was a lot of well, you can't do that, and you're not supposed to be like that. And I'm like, this is the one place where I am allowed to be the barbarian and the fighter and the ninja or whatever.
Or multi-class and be all three.
Exactly.
I like that.
Exactly.
And it was so frustrating when I would encounter these people who were like, no, we must maintain these stereotypes and sexism in the game. And, back in those days when I couldn't just hop on a computer and look it up, I would have guys keep the books away from me so that I couldn't read them.
Yeah,
so that they could
early
be the
gatekeeping,
boss.
yeah.
So they would literally take the book out of my hands. But often, that was the only people I had to game with. So it was either I put up with that or I didn't game. Yeah, that really sucked. I mean, I did find better people to game with. They were out there. It takes some time, and obviously it's the same thing now. That hasn't changed. You hop online and you try and find a group. And
one of the benefits of the modern age is that it's a lot easier in most cases to find a group, be like, you know what, these aren't my people, and then find another group.
Yeah.
Oh god, yeah.
You know?
Like I regularly game with people who live in like Europe, in like the Netherlands and stuff.
But moving into the games that are currently out there have the D20 that are not D&D, and that's I really want to get us to that. Before we go too far, I do want to definitely toss out there a quick salute to the D20 SRD properties that really were kind of cool, like Farscape, Spycraft, Star Wars D20 was freaking awesome. Mutants and Masterminds, which is still going from Green Ronin. We're not going to talk about them on this show, but needless to say, these games also fill this niche.
Mm-hmm.
From the halls of half-price books to the bargain shelves of Gen Con, may your pages never lose their luster, and may your spines never lose your stitching. But how about some recommendations or some topics of some games that also use the D20? Do I have anybody who wants to toss one out there?
Well, I have played Pathfinder, and it's crunchier than I like. I am not a rules-heavy person. I'm a very improv, role-play leaning kind of person. A buddy of mine ran the game, and he was very good about getting us. What he encouraged with us was to use the numbers to build the type of character you want. So, like, it was a really interesting way of, like, really being able to tweak your character. Specifically, I was playing a gunslinger, so I like, made myself into, like, the super sniper and that sort of thing. Even as someone who doesn't like a lot of crunch, I was able to get into it because of that. Because, it's more like, just instead of looking at the numbers and going, too many, like, how can I make these numbers work for me in a way that will, facilitate what I want to do. And it's very satisfying when it works. It's definitely very satisfying when it works.
I grabbed the D20 Pathfinder book for the second edition, I think, and now they've moved into the ORC, which is their attempt to completely separate themselves from Dungeons and Dragons. And I bought the set because I'm going to support a union gig. Pathfinder and Paizo is a union shop with their writers and their content creators. So I was like, heck yeah, even though I might not play it for a while, I definitely backed them and grabbed a set of them. Character creation is very different. The layout's different. Everything feels different, but it still has that roll your D20. D10 is kind of the median of what you're trying to go for. If you roll a 10 or higher, you're going to probably succeed. Has anybody else really followed the whole ORC, like what their changes are?
Sure, I've been trying to follow it religiously because my wife and I are writing our own D20 based setting, and right now we're currently playing through 5th edition, but we also want to be able to control a lot more of our setting, and honestly, being able to support something that is union, that feels a lot more comfortable. It's also a lot less fraught with legalese if you're actually reading the ORC versus the current incarnation of the SRD, which has been changed. There's a lot more, hey, your intellectual property is still your intellectual property. You are just using bits of our intellectual property to support it. You are still skinning it. We don't own that. We just own the internal mechanics. It's like somebody putting wrap on top of a pre-built chassis.
I think that the most recent ORC did go through the legal means of becoming one of the official, like, Creative Commons licenses now as well.
Yeah.
So that is freaking amazing.
Using Creative Commons 5.0, whatever the current incarnation of Creative Commons is.
Yeah.
So the one where particular Creative Commons where you don't have to share your specifics as part of that license, kind of thing. Because the Creative Commons license has gone through several changes itself over the years.
I think Pathfinder follows a lot of the same tropes initially. Does a lot of things that are good, but I think it's a good, if not D&D, or if you're looking for something that feels similar, I think that Pathfinder is a great way to go. Now, how about another property?
I've got one we can talk about. So it is going to be Renegade System.
Nice.
And right now, if you've ever wanted to pit My Little Ponies versus G.I. Joe versus Transformers versus Power Rangers,
That's
this is
awesome.
probably the system for you. Much like the old Palladium games back in the day, all the rules are similar. You can integrate really easily. I would call this D20 adjacent, though, because
Really?
while the D20 is one of your main rollers, everything is based off of skill checks, including fighting. You're rolling a D20, but kind of like Savage Lands, where you put points into your certain skills. Let's say you put a lot into sniping, and that's a finesse skill. Then you roll the D20 plus, say, a D12. You roll those together, add it together, and that's your metric for success or not.
I like that
So
system.
yeah, it's really nice. It doesn't really it's not just the D20. And as far as the Transformers perspective goes, I only have this one, so I wasn't able to look up at the G.I. Joe or anything like that. Like D&D, you have your roll, and then you've got all of your proficiencies and other things that you can put into the roll to move it up and down, or to move it up. Very rarely does you get penalties to roll downward. Like, you may be at disadvantage, but you still add in all of your same numbers. With this, there's a ability to increase your range. Like, let's say you only had a D6 in punching. Depending on all of your perks and other environmental things, that could move your range up and down for a given roll. So you could end up rolling a D12 because, let's say, you've got a lot of strength, so that increases your range, things like that. And then if you specialize, you actually get to roll all the dice underneath that and add that to your D20 roll. So yeah, it's got a lot of flexibility and really kind of amazing things like that.
And yeah,
That sounds really fun. I like
That
that.
does sound.
And it's built for cinematics. I mean, it's Transformers, of course. You've got to have it. The one thing I don't like is damage is 1 point at a time. It doesn't matter. And that bugs me because, like, if Megatron lands a hit on you, it does 1 point of damage.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is the cinematic style. Is that it's a glancing blow. It's not a direct hit. Always.
True,
I mean, it's always that last point.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It makes sense from the the old cartoons and comics perspective, where of course no one ever really got hurt, right?
Right. Of course.
Occasionally in Transformers, you might have someone die,
But it was never permanent.
No, and
never really permanent.
well, and in comics too, it's the same. They only ever die if it is convenient to the current plot.
Yes.
And they never stay dead because that's never convenient to the current plot.
I mean, in the Transformers comics alone, I know a lot of bots died in the smelting pit.
Oh, Unicron? Yeah.
Man.
Well, not just Unicron, Cybertron's smelting pits.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing.
Yeah, but usually then that's never like a main character. It's always background characters.
Yeah,
background characters
definitely.
are allowed to die. Main characters never do.
The other thing I would say is lacking from this game that I really in D&D, and it kind of comes back to that damage. Like, you're only doing 1 point of damage at a time. It is such a great feeling in D&D to land a critical. If you put your divine smite into it, and all of a sudden you're swinging for 50 points of damage. I mean, that's epic. It makes you feel strong. So for players that aren't used to kind of playing in the cinematic mode, it could be a little.
Yeah, it can be a little.
I think what you'll find is most of these systems also try to offset those large damage numbers by modifying how many hit points or how much life your systems and enemies have, right? Because when you drop from having a 100 point enemy down to an enemy that a big enemy might have 25 hit points and 1 point of damage at a time, if you start doing if you're doing 3 points, all of a sudden, wow, you're really swinging hard on this thing. There's it's all relative, right?
Yeah, it feels big.
But large numbers appeal to that I got double digits. Ooh.
Like Megatron has 25 health, Shockwave has 21. So yeah, I mean, it is a smaller range, yes.
Yeah. Which actually, that game system is a great segue to another one, just because of the way you described it, and that is the Dungeon Crawl Classics and Mutant Crawl Classics systems.
Yep.
Now, if you've never played them, what's up, bud?
The tunnel, the funnel. Here's 4 characters. One of them might survive.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a part of the gaming scene that is the way it is. It's not a scene I play in commonly, but there are a lot that do it. But Dungeon Crawl has a d20 for most resolutions, but it does also use really strange dice in a dice change resolution, where depending on factors, you can raise that dice or lower that dice to sizes that you've never even imagined, like a D22 or a D18 or a D13, and so on and so forth. You augment that dice up and down, but it's a classic fantasy. I would liken it more to AD&D and First Edition because it does kind of pigeonhole you sometimes. It also has a little bit of Warhammer Fantasy, if you've ever played that really old version, where you're playing careers. Like, you are a baker that decided to go into a cavern. Yay for you. Or you are a mage, which I have played a mage in Dungeon Crawl Classics, and it was one of the most fun things I've ever done.
God, that one looked nuts. Didn't we cover Dungeon Crawl Classics in one of our charity live streams?
Yeah,
I was in that game.
Yeah, Shalel ran that game, and absolutely
was
phenomenal GM. I was hoping that he might be able to get on for this show, but he works. Yeah, he works in Japan, so having him on the show ever so often is kind of a real treat. Somebody want to toss out another one in this kind of the D20 vein?
One I haven't quite gotten the chance to play with, but I did get my hands on their system resource document is Cypher System. That's another good D20 based system. There are a couple of other games within that. I think Numenera.
That's the one I've played, yeah.
Yeah, Cypher is a setting or a system on its own. Numenera is settings within Cypher. It's a really interesting system. And before Wizards of the Coast SRD fiasco, it also had one of the best SRD documents that I've seen, because their entire game is part of that SRD for the system. It's a 200, 300 page document. That's the mechanics, not just their license language. So I can't wait to get more of my hands on that one outside of Numenera. I picked up Numenera at one point to try and play it back before the world went into chaos and isolation. It's also one of those that I am really, really hoping comes forward once Wizards of the Coast kind of finally hits that oversaturation point and starts precipitating downwards again. So I'm excited for that one.
Yeah, chat's mentioning it's Old Gods of Appalachia. That podcast.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that.
Yeah,
I did play Numenera. I really, really enjoyed it. I remember really enjoying the system, having a lot of fun with that. Gods of Appalachia sounds super interesting too.
It is.
I got to play Old Gods of Appalachia, and it was a lot of fun. I got to do it as a one shot for another show, another channel, and it was a great time. We really leaned into the Ozarks of it.
I will just toss this out there. If you can find the podcast Old Gods, it will blow your mind. It will make you messed up. Serious content warnings. If you can't handle horror, don't go find it. But it is beautiful as a story. I know that for Cypher System, there's also Predation, and there's also The Strange. It is a system that has attracted some good properties to it. And Monty Cook is the bomb. They put on an amazing show every Gamehole Con. The second floor is pretty much theirs. And it's a great place to just chill out. They've had drinks and everything else up there, and it's a good time. Absolutely love the company. Absolutely love the people that they've had working for them. So another good company to support. But anyone else want to toss out yet another one?
I've got a handful here I can touch on briefly.
Absolutely.
I will ping each of them. So I got really into Dragonbane, which for those folks who are unfamiliar, it is the recent, within the last year or two, reboot of an old Scandinavian system that was released in the 80s. And it very much, the tagline for the system is mirth and mayhem, and it very much leans into that. The dice mechanics feature a Bane and Boon system, and then there's also, you can roll dragons and demons. So rolling a dragon is essentially rolling a critical. Rolling a demon is essentially rolling a critical failure. It is a roll over system.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was a lot of fun. I ran the game for a couple of conventions. I ran a couple of one-shots. And what we found in playing the system is that it's very lethal, right? The system does not play around damage-wise. If you are rolling to hit something, you either hit it or you don't. There's really not a whole lot of damage mitigation. There's no chances for an enemy to not get hit. It's literally you hit them or you don't, and when you hit them, do a chunk of damage. Like, it's definitely something where if the dice are against you as a player, you won't last very long.
Is that the same system as Symborum, or is Symborum on a different system?
Symborum is different.
So, okay.
They're both from Free League.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what my brain associated.
Yeah. Yep. They're both Free League systems, but Dragonbane is based specifically on that older Scandinavian system, whereas Symborum is Symborum is their property.
Yeah.
Okay, it's fun.
And Symborum is a roll under, I believe, if I
roll
recall
under.
correctly. Yeah. Again, Symborum as a system is very dark European. The world that you inhabit in that system is not full of hope, put it that way.
Yeah.
I got to play in a short campaign of that, and I got to play basically the ogre character, which essentially is a forest spirit that at some point decides to come out of the forest and hang out with people for a while. It was a lot of fun. The system, the one thing I will say about Symborum is it felt very swingy.
I remember that.
There were checks where there were sometimes checks that were super easy to hit, and there were sometimes checks that were very difficult to hit, and it didn't seem like there was a great bell curve to that system, right? It's either you're swinging really high or you're not hitting anything. Like there's not a whole lot of in between there.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of very similar to, Tales from the Loop kind of has that feeling as well. It's like that moment. The way Tales from the Loop was described to me was it's very much in the same vein as the book It by Stephen King, where they're always getting beaten down. And then there's that moment when they all are standing on the ledge throwing rocks at the bullies. And that is that one moment where they actually stood up for themselves and did something amazing. And that's where Tales from the Loop had that kind of feeling. So I'm wondering if Symborum has that kind of build.
No, Symborum very much feels like the storyline that you are in is destined to end poorly. It's just how poorly is it going to end?
Very grim, dark system.
It is a very dark system. However, that made for some very interesting gameplay in the groups I was in, because everyone wanted to play light in a dark system. So you've got this whole world that is beating your characters down constantly, and the group I was in was like, you know what, we're not going to let this tear us down. And
I like that though.
Here we go. Let's see how this plays out. And then the other system I'll mention real briefly is one that I'm very familiar with. It's called Identeco. It's an independent system. I think we've featured it on Rook and Rasp before. I know a number of our featured players in Rook and Rasp have participated in streams on their channel once in a while. And it's a cyberpunk system that's d20 based. It's a very crunchy system. There's a lot of skills. It's all rolling over target numbers for skills. Again, it kind of leans into higher is better, even higher is even better. And every little advantage you can give yourself with your statistics, with your skills and everything else, every little edge you can bump that number up just ends up helping you, right? I have a character that's like level 6 or 7 in that game. Or I had a character that was level 6 or 7, and like there were some skills I had a bonus of like 12 to. Just from various pieces of gear and cyberware you can get, and like so many other things that offset, right?
Yeah.
But it's fun because even though as we talk about these systems, they're all using similar dice, they're all using dice in similar ways, they tend to take pieces of existing D20 systems and modify them or really highlight them, right? That's one thing I'm really enjoying. And the last one I'll mention, and I'm sure other people here have a lot of experience with it too, is the Modifius, the 2D20 systems.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I haven't played an iteration of the 2D20s that I haven't enjoyed. All the same system, but each time that they've brought a different flavor, a different property into it, they use the 2D20 system. Whoever's designing these, they're taking the 2D20 system and saying, okay, here are the facets of this system that work best for this property. Let's really push those. Because to go from playing like 2D20 Conan, which I mean,
Yeah.
again, 2D20 Conan is very high adventure. Combat is extremely lethal. Like
I
it's
really need
very
to
much
play that.
built. Oh my gosh, it's some. If you get a chance, I recommend it. If I could run
Yeah.
it, I would. I would
Yeah.
even think about it.
I don't think I've ever played a 2D20 system actually.
Oh,
Or if I have, I only did like one time, a long time ago.
You've
But
got Conan, you've got Dune, and again, same system.
yeah,
But then when you get to the Dune, it's like they looked
Political.
at the system and they were like, here's how we can use this system to do all the political string pulling and really
yeah.
dive into the intrigue part that Dune is best at, right?
Mhm.
And then you've got I just recently got to play Fallout and
Oh yeah.
again, Fallout feels like Fallout. Like they're
Mhm.
for some reason somehow they made the combat feel very swingy. Like it's either I'm missing all the time and then boom, I get a critical hit, and it feels like that same in the game where like I'm missing, and then suddenly I get to watch the bullet streak across the screen and like blow someone up. Like it has that, and with all the junk and the way that they've built around the property and like the feel of the wastelands. Again, it's amazing. And John, I mean, Lord knows you can speak to Star Trek.
Well, funny you should mention.
So
because-
can I.
Yeah, Shawn. Yeah, you both they can definitely speak to Star Trek.
So the 2D20 system ties in a weird way because when we talk about board games and we say Euro-style board games, it's about not exactly directly competitive gameplay where you're building up a point system, but the points are usually added up at the end of a game. When you talk about tabletop role-playing games, when you talk about Euro-style tabletop role-playing games, especially in the D20, a lot of times you're talking about the roll lower, where the 1 is a critical and the 20 is a failure. Star Trek is a 2D20. Every time you roll within your skill frame, like your skill and your stat frame, you're succeeding per dice once, unless you get a critical, and then it's twice. So if you're rolling 2 dice only, you have a chance of anywhere from no successes to 4 successes if you get criticals on both dice. Creates a really interesting feed on that. Star Trek is good. They also do have Fallout is amazing. It is, in my opinion, the best iteration of 2D20 to come out yet. Now, they also did have Conan. Conan is a license that has lapsed. So if you find the books, and I'm saying this as a collector, if you find the books, you are finding something that is out of print. And if you want to grab it, grab it. PDFs, I think, have also been pulled now, so you cannot get them on DriveThru RPG.
My dad was a huge Conan lover, and my name Sharene is from Conan.
Nice.
So it's so over the top. It's so cheesy. It's so. It is exactly what it says on the tin. It is adventure, and there's no brain involved. You don't think.
Oh, yeah.
You kill the sorcerers because he hates magic, and you with the sword, and you fight big monsters, and that's it. And you meet hot women, and isn't that the dream?
Yeah. Now, as far as Modifius goes, who are the publishers of the 2D20 system, they also ported Infinity, which is a French battle game originally, and they turned it into a role-playing game. So that's also within the universe. Achtung Cthulhu, which has been all over the map. There was one released by Chaosium because they hold the Call of Cthulhu license. Well, now Achtung Cthulhu is held by the 2D20 license. Trying to think, are there any others I'm missing that are 2D20?
I think we've hit all of the major Modifius ones.
There's one hidden one. There is one hidden one I forgot about. Not many people talk about it. Homeworld. So the old computer game Homeworld has also been ported to 2D20.
I completely forgot about that.
I haven't seen people really talk about it as much.
Homeworld was also, like, just to go off topic for a second.
Yeah.
Homeworld was very much a very niche style of game that got really well known for how well it was done. But I grew up in that era, and I don't really know a ton of people that enjoyed and played Homeworld like frequently. But it was a really neat setting.
I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so I've got a special place in my heart. But the way they laid out those books, it's like reading a Starfleet man. dry and technical. It's just the way it's like, yep, this is Star Trek. This is awesome. And like the Fallout book is the same way. It's like, yeah, I could see me finding this in the wasteland and picking it up and learning a new skill. I mean, the books are gorgeous, and it's a testament to knowing the property that makes these games so successful for them. And I think that's part of it. I mean, the system is great and it moves really well, but when I've played Fallout, I've played Star Trek, I've read through the Dune book, and even though they share the same system, they are like 3 completely different games. And it's just amazing.
Well, pulling in and moving on, also in this same vein of the Euro style, I'm going to pull in one that not too many people talk about, and that is The Dark Eye. So
That is pretty.
Yeah. The Dark Eye is from Ulysses Spiel. So this is a German company that brought this over and ported it. It had been ported for D&D 3rd edition in about 2000. And so it's an interesting game. They came to Gen Con a few years ago, and the way they sold the game was, hey, you're playing in a world that is based on folklore of different countries that are not where you're from. Why not play the game that is from the country with the folklore? If you want to play a game that has German folklore, why not play a game by Germans? That is logical.
And you would expect, I think, there to be a lot less issues with like the cultural appropriation and the, mishandling or misunderstanding of folklore. If you're talking about your own country's folklore, you would kind of hope at least that they would be representing it with a lot more respect and fact. It wasn't just some writer making stuff up, that it's based on. I mean, I'm a nerd. I like to research things, and I like it when, sometimes it's fun if something is based on like real folklore, because then you can go and research that and give you other ideas for, plot hooks and whatnot.
With The Dark Eye, this is a system of roll lower, which actually kind of came out of Tunnels and Trolls in the 80s, which was a European game. The idea, again, 1 was a critical, 20 was a failure. It was a harder game because they made it like it was a 1 through a 4 was like your area of success. So it was a much harder game. But Dark Eye, they call upon you to use 3 different skills or stats. You're going to roll 3 different colored or 3 different d20s to succeed on a skill, because their argument is every skill is not just one thing. It is not just dexterity. It is not just strength. It is not just constitution. When you are climbing a rope over a chasm, you are using your strength. You're using your dexterity. You're using your constitution. So you're rolling all 3 of those dice, and you need to succeed on all 3 of those dice in order to succeed on the skill check. If you fail on one of those dice, you know the way in which you have failed. Could you not hold on? Were you not strong enough? Did you put your hand? So it's an interesting concept in that way.
It's funny that you mentioned that system, because we were talking about it in our side chat here, and it came up, and it wasn't in our original rundown, but Mork Borg is a system that's a D20 and use. It's very similar in that way. Mork Borg, they go with 4 skills, and anything you could possibly ever do goes into those 4 skills. It's a roll under system, if I remember right. It's, again, extremely brutal. Like the system in and of itself, there is a high likelihood that your character is going to die. Like, that's just the brutality of the system. It's all built around random tables too. Like it very much harkens back to early editions of other systems. If you want to run this for somebody, there's literally an entire section on the back of the book that's like, here's your random dungeon, here's your random enemies, here's like roll percentage dice to get these random things so you can make an adventure right off the bat. Here's the reason you're adventuring, and go. And here's all the things that are going to kill you.
I did not know that Mork Borg was D20. I recently grabbed the books for Pirate Borg.
It's like, again, it's a very heavy metal, death metal versions of genre games, right? Because I know that somebody's working on like Cowboy Borg.
Yep.
Like
Duck Borg.
Duck Borg is, yes. Duck Borg is, it's amazing. There's a lot of variants for that system. And then the other one that was mentioned by somebody in our chat, Rilche86, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, Shadow of the Demon Lord, inside of its own genre. It's a well-known D20, like dark horror, like leans heavy into the gore and gruesomeness of the setting that it's in. Everything will kill you.
Is that the book? Was there an older version of Morkborg? Or am I thinking of something else?
No, it's a fairly new game. It has an old look to it. It has almost a zine look to it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's like heavy metal.
Yeah, but I remember there being a game that I played a long time ago, like in the 90s, and it had weird descriptions for your abilities. And the only one I remember for some reason was able to put sharp things through soft things that scream and bleed. That was the name of your power.
That's
that was the name of your power. And the whole
oh my gosh.
thing was done in like ink. It was like handwritten. It was like all hand drawn, and it was like doodled, and there was like little, and it was kind of trippy, but it was also kind of metal, and it was kind of, it's like right on the tip of your brain, right?
I am having a memory of a system that has been referenced a number of times in conversations in the last few years.
If it's like disgusting, as in even the writing in it was really inappropriate.
Yeah.
Okay, then
exactly.
I think I know which one you're talking about. I'm not certain I want to say it out loud.
No. Just to know that I think we're all talking about the same system. It was pretty bad.
Should I say
it? Not that one, Kori.
From a long time ago.
I think nobody talks about it for good reason.
It was so long ago. I just remembered like thinking that those. Yeah, so like D20 doesn't make a good system. It just makes a system.
All of these systems we're talking about use D20, but it's not all like variations on the same thing, right? Like D20 as the primary die that you use, but you may not be looking at the same thing, right? So anybody can build a system around a D20, and to build on your point, Sharene, not every D20 system that's built is good.
But I think sometimes that's also a little bit intimidating for people. Like, I think that's one of the reasons why people are afraid to step out of D&D. Because especially, like, that's what you've been introduced to, or you get used to it, and you know how that works. And you're like, okay, but what if I go to all the trouble of learning a new system, and I hate it? Most of us grew up, when we got into gaming, we got exposed to many different types of games.
Yes.
It taught me that sometimes you can read through a book and maybe take one or two pieces out of it and go, okay, I like this concept and I like this concept, but everything else is no good, and that's fine.
I've got 3 more games that I want to throw y'all's way, because we're talking about system. We've talked about rolling under, we've talked about rolling over, and I've got one that kind of breaks the mold that I will bring your way now, and that is Polaris. Polaris is from Black Library, which is in Southern Europe, and I thought for a long time I would never find another game that does what it does. And what it challenges you with is you're not trying to roll over or under. You are trying to get as close to the target number as possible. So if your target number is a 10, the closer you are to it, the better variable of your success. So if you roll like a 9, you've got like you've got an extreme success. You roll down to a 6, you've got just a minimal success. So it kind of puts you in this range to know how well you did on a test.
Is that the one that we played on stream, John?
Yes, it is. Yes, actually.
That was a lot of fun trying to hit that target number. It was exciting to try to swing for it,
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
I'll put this up so you can get a feel for the world. It takes place in a post-apocalyptic kind of setting where the world's polar ice caps have melted and our atmosphere is gone. Not only is it gone, but the surface is said to be toxic after a battle with aliens. So all life, mankind has moved underwater. And so the entire game takes place in these structures, underwater structures, submarines, countries that live and exist entirely underwater. the reason the name Polaris, the name of the game, is the Polaris Force, which is a force of magic or power that has been awakened in the world thanks to some aliens that came and helped us out. Basically gave us the Polaris ability to fight back against the aliens. We basically gained psychic powers to reach across this void and do all kinds of amazing things. Downside to it is, if you have Polaris powers, you have a shortened lifespan. But altogether, amazing game, well written, has a little bit of a cyberpunk feel. There's only one edition of the game in English. They've continued on, which breaks my heart. They put out 2 editions after this one overseas.
Conceptually, I don't know if anybody remembers watching it, the Sequest show, when the later seasons where they went to the future and it was more kind of grim dark Sequest. That's Polaris, but way cooler. Polaris, way cooler than what we had that final season of Sequest.
Nice.
Yeah. Now, another one that I'm going to toss out has recently come back into print, and I am loving it. I have gotten to play with the line editor of the game twice now, of the current line editor, and that is Pendragon. Pendragon is from Chaosium, and you play as knights of the realm from different areas and different countries. There's a lot of historical research into it to try and merge both the fantasy of King Arthur with the real world. So they talk about being knights from Ireland in that time period, in Scotland as well, coming down. And it is a lot of fun. It is super lethal. My first time to play it, I went through 4 characters in one session. I had a blast. I do want to say that. I had an absolute blast because I went into combat with a sword versus a mythical giant boar for my lady love. And it killed me 4 times. But the thing is, I had a blast. And I went into the game kind of knowing that that's kind of the feel. But seriously, Pendragon, amazing game. The goal is, it is a roll below your target number, but hitting the number is a critical success. So it kind of felt, it feels a little bit like Polaris. These are the only 2 games I know that they want you to roll the target number. Rolling a 20 is a failure. Now, I love this. So they have something in this game called passions. And your passions adjust your ability and adjust your failure number. So all of a sudden, maybe you are passionate or about your kingdom, about your family, or about your religion, or about whatever. Maybe you are passionate about the concept of courtly love. And if you can...
Courtney Love?
Courtney Love. So if you can figure out a way to include a song from Hole in your role... No. If you can figure out a way to include your passion into your role, you can gain a bonus. Not only that, but you can also shift your failure. So all of a sudden, if you roll a 20, it doesn't matter that you failed, because now it's a 24 or whatever else. I love that idea, and it's a great, great game. I have one more, Aben.
Yeah, go for it. Share.
Okay. So I'm going to bring us back across the oceans, back to the U.S. And
Riffs.
Yeah, we had to pull it out. I'm sorry, folks. We had to pull out the Palladium systems.
I played that a long time ago, yeah.
Oh,
Rifts.
So,
yeah.
Which, by the way, I had my Palladium stuff ready to go, but Rifts covers it all.
That's the game I played. It was Palladium Heroes. Palladium Heroes.
Nice.
I used to play that one. I could only remember that it was a superhero game, and that name just did not narrow it down. I remember playing that, and a buddy of mine in that game had himself a super suit. He was inside like a big mecha, and every time he was a scientist, and of course every time he had to do something, it was for science, and like that was his rallying cry.
What's funny is there's like only a quarter inch of the book that's for rules. The rest of it is characters, weapons,
powers.
Powers. Yeah. It's just...
I remember really liking that.
Yeah.
I started playing this game when I was 12, so it pretty much was trying to recreate Spider-Man, Batman,
Wolverine,
right?
Wrong with that? No, that's great.
Yeah.
But Rifts is big.
Well, Rifts, and I'm going to say the Palladium system in general, because all Palladium games use the same system. The entire idea is that you can plug and play. Rifts is a kitchen sink. Everything that ever existed can be found in it. You want vampires, you want knights in shining armor, you want giant mecha, you name it. It exists in the Rifts universe. But I think Palladium, as far as I'm concerned, is a little bit back on the map because of how big the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Kickstarter went. And so now Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is back out there as a role-playing game, which we have all been begging for.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been begging for it. We've been like, hey, there's a board game.
Yeah.
You know, Palladium and their d20 system, what they did, I like. So if you're dealing with AC, in Dungeons and Dragons and in Palladium, 10 is kind of that median. Like if you're figuring out your armor, you're starting at 10, adding stuff up, trying to figure out what you can hit. Palladium sets it at 5. So if you can somehow roll higher than 5, you're going to hit. Now, they changed that a little bit by adding different ways of having armor. And your armor automatically changes your AC. It changes it from like a 5 to a 10 or a 5 to a 12, which is kind of a cool way of doing it. So, but Palladium, so all these systems we've done, D20 is the critical. We've done 1 is the critical. We've seen games that have, you're trying to roll the target number. In Palladium, all rolls are versus. If you roll a d20 to hit, they're rolling a d20 to dodge. And you are comparing those numbers. So Palladium shifts it that way. And on top of that, most combat rolls, like I said, are versus, but that AC, if they cannot dodge, you're trying to hit a 5. So I think that's a really cool idea. They handle skills differently. All Palladium skills are done with percentile, kind of like Chaosium. It's an interesting way that it does that little touch of complexity. Now, the thing is, can I love you, Palladium. Can I honestly hand this book to somebody and tell them this is the game you need to play? I love Palladium. I do. But it's also going to be the hardest sell to get a new gamer into, in my opinion.
Unless it's Turtles.
I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with just the fact that there are so many people when we talk about, the elephant in the room, right, being D&D. There are certainly a fair number of people out there who are like, I know this system, and when I decide I want to play a game, I don't want to spend all the small window of free time I have learning something new when this suits my purposes, right? Like, I think there's a lot of people that are like that, where when you only have that couple hours a week to play with a group of friends, perhaps, D&D is just the easy answer because almost everybody knows how to play it.
Not only that, you can take D&D and then play another system, but the rule set's going to be the same. Again, that's an easier transition to play into. You don't have to learn anything new. Granted, we're kind of the oddballs in the room because, I find a new game book and I'm like, I want to read it. I want to learn the rules. We'll see how this works.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think this is a good point to kind of go out on is here's your chance. There are tons of games out there that are D20. There are tons of things to experience. There's more than just the flavor of D&D. There's more than just Pathfinder. And this is just a small portion of the community. We've stuck to 1 dice, and look how much we've talked about. And my goal is we're going to start talking about more and more systems or more and more games out there that use similar mechanics, games that use D6s, games that use D10s, games that use dice pools, games that use cards, games that are diceless. And I kind of want to do this before we start hitting individual properties. We're going to talk about the way these games are, because when Tome Travelers first started in 2016, it was more like a shotgun. Here's a game I like. 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 And I was like,
ain't nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah. We're going to be hitting all these different ways that games are out there. And then we'll start hitting individual properties, and we'll start talking about all the different parts and pieces of it. Does anybody have any other points they want to go out on?
Kind of segging into your point, the good thing about D&D and a lot of these other systems is that today we have far more role-playing games than we've ever had in circulation before.
Oh, heck yeah.
Because not only are people going, okay, I want to play D&D because it's so saturated in like media representation, you also have these other people that are going, okay, D&D is fun. I want to see what else is out there. Oh, what else is out there doesn't suit what I feel like I want from a role-playing game. Let me write my own. And that, I think, is also fucking amazing. I love that aspect of being a gamer today.
Yeah, I love it
You
too.
have to give
like,
credit to the original systems, like D&D back way when, and some of the others that were around before I was even born. I'm a baby.
I think this is a great note to go out on for tonight. Right now, we're doing our shows once a month until we get to a point where I think we can start piping them out. We do have a YouTube channel where we keep most of our actual plays, and we also have a specifically YouTube channel for our podcast. So it's Rook and Rasp Podcasts on YouTube. And if you want to see our first episode where we kind of just really got to know each other and talked about the games that are the core experiences of RPGs, that one is there. Other than that, my name's John Thompson here at Rook and Rasp. And I'll let everybody kind of go ahead and say goodnight for the evening.
Good night, folks.
All right.
Join us next month.
Fast Yearly Podcast presents The Tome Travelers.